So welcome to Meeting the Needs of ELs in Arts Education. This is part 2, classroom applications, and this is part of our Building Back Stronger professional development series. We hope that you will watch part 1 if you have not already, and then we are really happy to have you here for part 2 today. I'd like to take a moment just to introduce ourselves to you. We are the Arts Education team at DPI. I'm Sayward Gridley, and I'm your Dance and Visual Arts Consultant, and Brandon Rader is your Music and Theater Arts Consultant as well. You'll hear from him in just a minute. If you don't already know, we work very closely together as a team on everything, so you can always copy us both on communication. When one of us doesn't know the answer to something, the other one can chime in. And we are led by our section chief for social studies and arts education, Dr. Lori Major Carlin. We have several more guests with us today, but we will introduce them, each of them, when we get to their sections. As we move through our series, we want to encourage you to follow along in our reflection journal. You can get this journal by typing in the bit.ly link that you see on the screen there, or we will put it in the chat for you. And it will take you to a force a copy. So you'll be directed to force copy this, and it'll make your own copy of the journal that you can type in directly to. We've preloaded the journal with all the links from the slide deck, so you won't need to spend any time copying them down or looking them up later. Additionally, this is your artifact for proving that you attended today if you're wanting CEU credit. So if you're watching this recording later, you'll be asked to upload a copy of your journal with your answers in order to receive your CEU certificate. Across the 2 webinars within this presentation, our goals are to help you gain confidence in supporting EL learners and understand what English language learners are, understand how Wida supports content standards, explain why it's important to support English learners with tailored supports for arts education. And primarily today, we'll look at identifying resources for further professional development and mostly share arts education success stories from across the state. Today, we will be covering the North Carolina Teacher Leadership Specialist Standards number 3 and 4, which is incorporating adult learning strategies and effective teaching practices as you implement change and facilitating the growth and development of educators. We are also looking at Professional Teaching Standards of North Carolina, Standard 2, which is establish a respectful environment for a diverse population of students. All right, we'll move on to our welcoming activity for today. So we'd love for you to use the chat for this. And since our first webinar on meeting the needs of ELs, if you were able to attend that and watch that, if not, then just think about maybe what you might be thinking about right now. But what are some highlights, successes, or positives you've experienced, which is the rose? The bud would be what are some challenges or something that you need more support on? And the thorn, what new ideas or something you're looking forward to learning more about? So please share a rose, a bud, and a thorn for us. Oops, I think I had those swapped. I think the bud is a new idea or something you're looking forward to, and a thorn is the challenge or something you need support on. One rose that's shared so far is NAEA is copying us tonight and holding a town hall of their own about meeting the needs of English learners. So we find that highly encouraging that national organizations across the field are looking at this same topic. And again, you don't have to share all 3 of these. If you'd like to share just one, if there's a challenge or something you need support on, or that you feel like you could really use some encouragement or more help with, or what's an idea you would like to explore or look forward to with this work? I see a bud here, incorporating strategies that we are all applying in our extracurricular activities into our daily curriculum. Awesome. Great, and feel free to keep those coming in. We'd love to hear them. And make sure that if you're watching this, that you share these in your reflection journal as well. And I'm going to hand things over to Brandon now.
All right, wonderful. Well, for anyone who might need a brush up on what we were talking about a week ago, don't worry, we'll give a brief review about part one today. So as mentioned in part one, we'll be utilizing this arts education filter to model how district PD leaders can make the transfer of professional development content to arts education instead of placing that burden on the actual arts educator. We know that when presenting a new topic or one that might meet resistance, it asks a lot of the educator to interpret that content and imagine how they might need to apply it that might be beyond their current capabilities. Today, we'll be specifically looking at how the Wida framework for multilingual learners and the North Carolina Standard Course of Study for English learners can be adapted to meet the needs of arts educators to improve their ability to meet the needs of each and every one of the students in their programs, that downstream effect. So in part one, we talked about who English learners are, why we need to make sure we are serving them, how the Wida content standards support content. We took a look at how Moore County is looking at their equity of access, and then we talked about funding opportunities and next steps.
So we are sure that you can tell from session one that we believe students and teachers can do anything they put their minds to. Wida agrees and has put together the following philosophy framework. Wida recognizes that multilingual students bring assets to the classroom because they already understand how language works, parts of speech, sentence structure, even reading strategies. They have cultural experiences to draw from and have a wide range of experiences that go beyond those of the typical community. They have experience navigating classrooms, how to learn, and how to show they've learned concepts. And they have interests and empathy. They know how to make connections and relationships. Remembering that our students are already full when they come to us helps us remember that they aren't empty vessels to be filled up. And certainly, Ivana, if you would like to add anything else to that, we would love it.
That was beautiful. I was just there in case you needed me.
All right, thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to classroom applications. One of the biggest things that we have been asked for is how to apply all of this wonderful research and background knowledge into direct classroom applications. So we are thrilled and beyond excited today with some of the wonderful teachers who have experience doing just that in their own classroom settings to be here to share with you. They each come from this material from a different place and different perspectives or approach, but all with the purpose of meeting the needs of the students that they teach and meeting them where they are. They have brought with them just a few examples of some of the things that they do and some success stories that they have from their own journeys, with the hopes that you may see these as ideas or little snippets or jumping off points to get your own team brainstorming. This is not by any means all that can be done, but just a few of some great examples to get you started. We can't wait to have you hear from them. And just a reminder that these are from our big ideas from Wida, those 4 big ideas, and how we'll be touching on all 4 with our guest speakers. So last webinar, you heard from Sylvia talking about equity of opportunity and access. We'll be looking today at integration of content and language, which will be with Anna, collaboration among stakeholders with Hollie and Yudi, and functional approach to language development with Jessica. So we're going to get started with our first two fabulous guest speakers for today. We have Hollie and Yudi, and I'll let them introduce themselves and tell you a little bit more about them.
Hey there, everybody. My name is Hollie Writtenberry, and I am the music teacher here at Manteo Elementary School.
And I am Yudialejandra Suarez, and I am the DLI teacher in second grade. So I teach Spanish in the dual language immersion program here at Manteo Elementary.
So Yudi and I are an example of how collaboration within your own building can help you strategize to come up with lessons and activities that will reach all students in the building, but in particular, our English language learners. And Yudi and I have taught together for 4 years. And when Yudi first came to our school and our country, I noticed that she was a huge supporter of my music programs, and she would volunteer to go with us to community performances, or she would just come into my room, and even when she saw classes, and participate in music class with us. And then we are sort of an example of a positive thing that came from COVID, because last year, due to COVID restrictions in our building, we were unable to teach specials face-to-face, and instead specials teachers were partnered up with classroom teachers to co-teach in their rooms for their students so that we were in a contained environment. And I was partnered up with Yudi, and what was already a friendship really grew. And what was awesome for me is, as a non-Spanish speaking teacher, I was able to not only learn to communicate some with Yudi, but I was able to watch the strategy she used in her classroom to reach both her English speaking students and her Spanish speaking students.
Yeah, I think that was like a great opportunity for us because she was involved like in a small group. She delivered instructions. She was like, I don't know how to pronounce these words, and we just go over the words and all stuff. So it was like she saw it, and then she was able to actually do it with those students that were actually learning Spanish. But it's like the same thing that you can apply with those students that are actually learning English. Like those things, like using visuals, like trying to incorporate words that I already know with new words to kind of to get the context. So we're going to talk about the process in our next slide and how we develop a bilingual course. So first of all, well, we just partner each other, as she just already said, and then we started the process of recruitment and publicity. We just sent all the information. She just typed it up in English, send it to me, like, okay, we need to translate this. I just translated in Spanish, so like all parents could read it and get the information in their native language. And we think that's really important for them to be like really feel part of this community. Then we go with the song selection, so we can decide together like which are the songs that are actually part of our culture, like these kids know already, their parents know the songs. Like we wanted to do something that was actually meaningful and not just any random song to translate it into Spanish. So we work to incorporate these songs with, of course, English songs from your own traditions, and then we perform some bilingual that we have in both languages already. And then they have to lead performances, like they were presenting to the audience in 2 different languages. So we have different kids that talk to the audience in English and in Spanish. Some were doing both roles, some were only doing one language. So I think that way everybody in our community could feel part of what the performance we were doing.
And what was really cool about this is actually an after-school event. So this is an extracurricular opportunity that we are offering our 4th and 5th graders. And the response was over the top, quite frankly. We had almost 90 students who chose to participate in this after-school activity to incorporate both languages in chorus. And with COVID restrictions still in place, we were rehearsing outdoors. I mean, there were just a lot of challenges before us, but the students really wanted to be a part of this, and their families really wanted to be a part of this. And word began to spread throughout our community about what we were doing. and our students began to get opportunities to be seen in our community. So the first opportunity they were given was they were invited to perform at our Board of Education meeting in November. And this was really, it was a great privilege and an honor for our students, but it was also a chance for them to begin educating our school system as a whole on the need for reaching our English learners, and for them to see that our English learners had things to offer to our school system. They had skill sets and talents that needed to be shared within our school system, and that they were in fact able to do that. And instead of being seen as having a disadvantage, they were seen as leaders in what we were doing. So that was really a great thing. You can see in the photos there, they're singing at our Board of Ed. It was really well received. And so that was just a really big highlight for us. And then the students were not only educating within our school system, but they were also educating within our community, because both our school and our community are 40% approximately Spanish speaking. And so we began to change sort of the face of our community. And as you'll see in the next slide, we began to do some community outreach performances. So here our students are performing at the Elizabethan Gardens and also at the Christmas tree lighting, which is in downtown Manteo. And in these performances, they were, of course, singing in both languages. They were speaking and doing narrations in both languages, which was really important to them. These were student-led performances. They were doing all the narrations themselves. They were doing, and they were doing it in their native languages. And then they began to get leadership roles, as you'll see in the next few photos there, which was really cool for them. The students themselves began to have a voice in educating our community about how important this was. And they were able to do so in their native languages. And what this began to develop within our chorus itself, but also within our community, was a heightened sense of social awareness. We had always seen sort of a disconnect in our community between students who were Spanish speaking and students who were English speaking. And even within our school building, we saw a little bit of that disconnect between teachers who were English speaking and teachers who were Spanish speaking. And instead, what we saw was students becoming friends, and teachers becoming friends. And within our community, there was community buy-in. Because we were performing in multiple languages, everyone in our community wanted to be a part of these performances. Everyone felt included, and everyone felt like they could relate to what we were doing.
Yeah, I think it was a big sense of feel that way, like feel seen, represented, value. That's why kind of the idea that we had when we just started doing that, we were like, okay, we're gonna do something when everybody could participate and we could be actually had this sense of belonging to our school, to our community. So we start, I think this was like a bridge for our Spanish speaking and our English speaking students to learn like, okay, you are both important, and let's see how we can use your skills and your talents to make this production to be even better and greater. So I think these students were not only the students that are in the dual language immersion program or that speak Spanish, also the English speakers, they get the opportunity to learn Spanish, which was a challenge for them. So I think it's like for them, it was like, okay, now just you see what your Spanish speaking friends had to do every single day of their life. Like they had to be translating all the time in their head. They had to learn how to pronounce or how to say this sentence right, how we can. So I think for them was also like that feeling of, oh my God, my friend had to do this all the time when he's in class. So that was like an opening night for them. And it was not only for the students that participated for us, but I think it also was for the entire student body that could see what we were doing, because it was just fantastic. As you can see in the next slide, we just built rapport within the student body.
Yeah, that's actually, those are photos. The last day of school before winter break, our chorus students went and basically made 2 lines to the entrance of our school, and they were singing in both languages as our students arrived to come to school that morning. And this was not cued. No one was given instructions like, hey, why don't you start high-fiving students? It just happened because students felt connected. They felt like they were a part of a much bigger picture. There was this family that connected them because they saw people singing in their language. They understood what was going on. It was songs that were native to their culture. And they really wanted to be a part of this. Yeah.
And it was joy driven. Like they were all like super excited to be there, to be sharing with their friends, because they were not allowed. We weren't allowed to have our performance to the grade levels as usual. You always do it this year. So for them was like, oh my God, we're actually singing to our friends, to this, like when they saw little kids, they were like, oh, high-fiving, like singing even better for the kindergartners. Like they were so happy to be there and to be like singing in both languages, to like inviting everybody, like welcoming every student to school that morning. That I think was just like a great, like our best performance.
It was just, the excitement was contagious. And we laugh, we say that it was an incredibly warm day, and our school is 2 stories, and there were literally teachers and students with the windows raised, hanging out the windows, listening and tapping along and making percussion sounds and all, because this was just something really unifying for our school body. And that was something we really wanted to see happen. That's just one of the many benefits of collaborating. Some other benefits we have kind of talked about as we've watched this picture unfold for us. As I always say, you know, some of your best resources are right in front of you sometimes. They're right within your own building. You have other experts who are able to brainstorm and share ideas, and that's a wonderful thing. And so I really appreciate the relationship Yudi and I have when we can kick back and just start sharing ideas and brainstorming. And what was really nice is that teachers are able to share the ideas that are authentic from their culture or in their native language. And I went to Yudi and I said, you know, all of our students know how to sing Feliz Navidad. I want something that's more meaningful to our Spanish speaking students. What's a meaningful piece that they'll really get excited about? And that's the kinds of ideas that I wouldn't have had that knowledge if I couldn't have relied on her. Teachers are able to communicate with all students and parents because there are no language barriers. When we have another teacher alongside me who can help with the parents that I may have difficulty or a challenge of communicating with because it's not my native language, I have a valuable resource right next to me so that nobody feels left out or nobody doesn't know what's going on. They're all included.
Sometimes like last minute thing, like somebody needs something and they need to call a parent and they are like, oh, but my parent doesn't speak English. It's like, okay, I will call, no worries. And then for those parents who had the call from a teacher after hours, it's like, oh, it's not my kid translating for the teacher. It's another teacher that can actually communicate with me. So I think that's also that something that you can also get to the parents and to the community, and also between the students, because they develop this appreciation for other cultures, for like, oh, how important it is to speak another language, and then you start developing friendships between each other and between different cultures. And because they also see how we are doing it, like we are like best friends now, we just get together. We are now like have a group of teachers and the community, like different parents that want to participate and help us. So they see like how everybody's so involved and so engaged in doing these activities. And I think that's something that they're gonna, after they have seen all those models, they're gonna keep doing it and replying with their own relationship among each other.
Yeah, they're definitely, good things are contagious. And when our students and our students and our parents and our community, when they see us as faculty modeling these great multicultural relationships, they then begin to develop these multicultural relationships, and more people want to be involved. So what we laugh about is some of those photos, you'll notice there's more adults than just Yudi and myself, because suddenly other teachers in the school wanted to be a part of this. Community members wanted to volunteer and be a part of this. So good things are contagious, and it's really a positive thing for our community. So now we've done that, we've had a bilingual chorus. Our question was, where do we go from here? How do we continue these strategies in other ways, both in the classroom and our extracurricular activities. So we are currently in the process, the very early stages of putting together a dual language musical theater production. And that is, again, something our students are used to doing a spring musical, but this was a whole new twist on the spring musical and incorporating it into both languages. Again, everything we send out to parents, if it's an email, I'm like, Yudi, can you translate? We send everything out in both languages so that our students and parents they know what's going on. So we don't have a lot of, oh, I didn't know much I could participate. I didn't know what time to be there. I didn't know how to pick my child up, because parents are informed because they're communicated in their own language, and it's wonderful. The audition process was probably the first place where we made a huge change, because we've always said, you know, a short solo, usually happy birthday, and a monologue. And what we did was we allowed the students to audition in their preferred language. And it was wonderful to see the students when they auditioned, because the comfort level was totally different. And I learned from Yudi with that, like, singing happy birthday in another language is a lot harder than singing happy birthday in your native language. Yeah. And so that was really a nice part of that, to help us get a diverse cast as well. And then Yudi is working directly with some of our cast members on character development. Some of their lines or all of their lines will be in their native language. And we're also working directly with the publishers to educate them that there is a need for these, to be allowed to modify existing productions, to go straight modification into another language, that a translation is not really a modification.
Yeah, definitely. Like, for my work with the character development is super easy. It's just like, I just call them one-on-one, I change in their lines, I'm telling you, okay, now how can you say that you know how to read, because some of the kids are not in the program, so I'm not 100% sure if they read in Spanish. And then when you find out that there are kids in 5th grade that they miss the chance to be in their language, but they know how to read in Spanish, that can change your work, because that means that they have skills to actually read and write. So I think that's really important for them, like, to see, like, yeah, I can read it, no worries, and they go ahead and do it. So that's pretty much my job right there with them, like, getting that confidence back so they're able to do these lines in Spanish on bilingual. So we're trying to incorporate more and more casts that have those lines in Spanish. And then also we are working with the publisher, as you said. We're trying to get all the rights and all the permissions, so we are good to go by spring, hopefully. Because I think it's important that we have these changes and the companies start, you know, creating their own material in both languages.
So we could talk to you all day about how much, obviously, we love doing this, but we want you to hear from the people who know this best, which is our students. We want you to see an example of what they do and hear from them why they think this is so important. Our dual language instructor here, Yudi, has always been a huge supporter of our music programs. And through that, we became such wonderful friends and partners that I really saw the value in utilizing her to enhance our music program and to reach all of our students, because we had such a large population of Spanish-speaking students and dual language immersion students who were joining our music programs. And so why not use our dual language students and our Spanish teachers to help us reach the rest of our students who are in the program. And then our students are all learning about each other's cultures, and they're just having a really good time doing it. They're becoming friends. They really are becoming family, and they love making music together, and we love reading them.
It's important to both incorporate Spanish and English into chorus. You can learn songs Spanish and English, like Mi Burrito Sabanero and Silent Night. You can sing songs in both English and Spanish if you just try hard enough.
As a part of the dual language immersion program here in Dare County, I think it's really important for us to have different environments when we can actually take our kids and let them know, like, well, learning a second language is important, and you have different scenarios where you can use those strategies, use those vocabulary words, and use all your skills in a second language to actually make a change in our community.
Tonight was really great. My daughter was in the chorus, and I just think it's really important for her to learn some songs in English and Spanish to expand her worldview. I'm also an ESL teacher, and so from that perspective, it's really important for our kids to be not only represented, but to be the ones who are leaders. And so they're leading in their native languages, and the other kids are learning that. It's the reverse of what usually goes on in the school, where they're the ones who everybody sees with like the deficit worldview of they're lacking English. But in situations like this, they have Spanish. They have this huge asset. And it's so important for them to realize that they have assets, and for the community to realize that they bring all these wonderful assets to the table as well.
I really love Spanish songs because it helps me learn how to sing in Spanish, and it just helps me also learn how to speak Spanish.
They learn about other cultures. They learn how people from other countries celebrate Christmas. They were doing such an awesome job learning and pronouncing and singing it.
I think it's important that my English-speaking friends learn these songs because they could be more successful in life because they be interested in learning Spanish.
I think this is part of a great cultural exchange for everybody, for the English speaker, for the Spanish speaker. So I think we're just gonna keep going and keep doing more arts together so we can mix both languages.
Great. Thank you so much for that wonderful video and for sharing so many wonderful tips about your process and your story. Really quickly, those of you who are watching, think for a moment and feel free to share with us in the chat what was most meaningful to you in this video. We've already seen a few things here. Goosebumps, building relationships, so inspiring, a great way to portray the Wida guiding principle number 1. Languages and culture are valuable resources to be leveraged for a school. And Sylvia also says, I love that you guys tap into the deep culture and don't just stay in the surface. So what other things resonated with you watching this video or from hearing Hollie and Yudi speak? Jessica says collaboration among students and teachers. That is definitely huge.
Those student voices meant so much to me personally. I love, we can't really speak about English learners without hearing from the English learners. So if it's meaningful to them, then we know we should be doing it.
I know I was holding back tears so many times throughout the video and you guys talking, hold it together. Mark says, giving the students leadership opportunities while participating. That is key, I think, right there, because they are our future leaders, right? And so giving them those opportunities now to see that they have that ability, I think is huge. And Johanna says, just so proud of these two educators and the work they're doing. Thank you. We are too. All right. Again, thank you, Hollie and Yudi. We're going to move on to our next guest today. This is Anna Irving, and we have a video to share for you. She is here with us to answer any questions in the chat, but she did pre-record this because she's been doing some testing. So we're going to hear now from Anna.
Hi, my name is Anna Irvin, and I'm an ESL teacher at an elementary school in China Grove, North Carolina, which is part of the Rowan Salisbury School District. I teach at an A+ art school. I have students from kindergarten all the way up to 5th grade, and I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about ways that I integrate the arts in with my ESL instruction. So ELs benefit from arts education the same way that all learners benefit from arts education. We know that Arts education builds critical thinking skills, helps students develop multiple intelligences. I've also noticed in my ESL class that newcomer students, and newcomers in ESL refers to students who have very little or no literacy knowledge in English. They might not be able to speak even in single words in English without assistance. I've noticed that those students in particular really respond well to arts education because for a lot of arts education activities, those students can participate almost as much as their typical peers with fewer modifications than what those students require in their regular classrooms. Typically, newcomers require significant classroom modifications, but in arts classes, they can sort of blend in with other kids and do different kinds of activities that aren't quite as language intense. The arts also provides opportunities to connect to students' home cultures. We're always trying to validate students' home cultures and make them feel like, you know, the place where they came from or the stuff that they do at home is important. So I'm going to share some activities that I do in my ESL class that you can maybe rip off and copy and do in arts classes.
So we're going to pause just for a moment there and think for a moment. So again, you can share in the chat or think to yourselves. But so Anna teaches ESL with arts integration. But if we remember that good integration goes two ways, right? How could we use these same strategies in our own content? So be thinking about that as we're watching this next portion of her video.
So the first one that I'm going to talk about is identity flags. This is an activity I do every year at the beginning of the year. And we do a study of different flags from around the world. I have a lot of knowledge about my students, so I know what countries their families come from. So I'm sure to highlight those flags in particular. And then we look at other ones that are just artistically interesting. And then I have students create their own identity flags using those flags from around the world. And you can see some examples here. Some students like to do basically a copy of their home culture flag. Some students like to kind of do a mixture of, you know, United States flag and their home culture flag. Some kids just do something completely random. I don't actually have any students from Canada, but I see a Canada flag there because that student just really liked that flag. That's fine. So we talk about, you know, how you can connect your home heritage with, you know, your life here in the United States and everything that you do at school. And that could be a really fun activity to do. Another thing that I do with my classes almost every week in the visual arts category is labeled drawings. So I do this with kids K-5 because it's so valuable. We have students draw, and sometimes it's a guided drawing, and then they have to include a minimum number of labels. And those labels can be vocabulary words from a story. They can be specific technical vocabulary that we're studying, but they have to include a set number of labels. And basically, it's like you're creating a visual arts graphic organizer, but it has those words labeled around the different drawings. And then we use those drawings to do speaking activities later on in the week and writing activities later on in the week. And writing and speaking are two areas, they're two language domains that we really like to focus on in ESL class, because for most students, those are the two language domains that are a little bit more difficult, that are more challenging, that they score lower on their access test. Access is the yearly English proficiency test that all ESL students in North Carolina take. So we really focus on speaking and writing. And these drawings can kind of be a little cheat sheet during the week that students can use to help with their speaking and writing. And then I think we have another example of the label drawings on the next slide. There's another one. So sometimes we do it like a compare and contrast, like the previous slide. Sometimes it's a sequence of events. So we have first, next, then last. Those sequencing words are very important. And then we have like the names of the characters, the emotions they're feeling, the critical points in the plot. So this was a story, The Best Seed in Second Grade, where the kid lost the hamster and the hamster sneezed. And so we had all those words included. So when they had to retell the story, they had those words labeled on their drawings. They know what it is. There's a visual component in addition to just a literacy component. And so that's why the visual arts piece was very helpful. And then this is another example comparing and contrasting the life of an early colonist in 1587 with Our Life Today in 2019, or it was 2019 when we did that example. And this student really went overboard with his labels, but you can see how he has the sun in the center because that's something that's the same in 1587 and 2019. And then he has different foods, clothing items, different pieces of technology, how the houses are the same and different. So that's another example of the label drawings. So this is a completely different project that I completely ripped off from the Carolina TESOL presentation from an ESL teacher named Heather Lindsay. So second grade did a big book study of the I Spy series, which if you're not familiar with it, get familiar with it because it's fantastic. Kids love it. It's a series of photographs with all these little hidden images, and there are rhyming riddles that go along with the photographs. So second grade did a huge book study on it, and then on the next slide, you'll see the results of one of our projects. So I had the second graders create photographs, and we talked about photography composition. You know, a lot of the photographs in the book are themed. So they'll be centered around a particular color, or all the objects are, you know, from a haunted house, or they're all Christmas themed. And I got a bunch of little stuff and had students compose different photographs. They were able to take 3 different photographs over the course of 3 days. And then they chose their best one to write a riddle. And we talked about rhyming words. I mean, there's so many different components of, you know, arts objectives and language objectives that came into this project. And then they had to video record themselves reading the rhyme out loud. And then they created a video that, you know, gave students time to look for the different clues, and then it circled the different clues. And the videos played on the morning announcements in our school-wide morning announcements. It was really cool, and the students were so proud of it. And they really got into photography after it that year. So then another project that I've worked on with several different groups, probably from like second grade to 5th grade, is stop motion animation. This is something that is really neat. It's a little difficult to do in the kind of pull-out setting that I see my students in, but it's a lot of fun. We had students read stories, and then they created little origami pieces that, you know, if you're not familiar with stop motion animation, you basically take a series of photographs, and then when you play them together, it looks like the thing is moving. And then they had to record an audio component to retell the story that they were creating with their stop motions. I'm done.
So visuals are incredibly helpful for English learners and integrate very easily with visual art. But how can you think about also using them in music, theater, or dance classes as well? So think about that and share any ideas that you may have with incorporating visuals into the other arts classes also.
Done a lot of those. Those are a lot of fun too. And then, you know, a lot of what I do is with visual arts because, you know, visuals are very important for English learners because they can connect to something without knowing a word. But I also incorporate other arts, oh my gosh, I forgot the word. Other arts as well. So, for example, with second grade, we do the butterfly life cycle every year. And I had students create a dance to go along with each motion of the butterfly life cycle. There's a lot of ways you can integrate science content and social studies content and with movement to make it a little more interesting. Okay. And then for music, one thing that I do is have students record or create their own rap of the math keywords. So for example, like if you see the word total in a math word problem, you're probably going to be adding at some point. So we learned a list of keywords and had students create a rap. And then they had to actually say their rap with a beat, which some of them were a little bit nervous at first, but they did okay with it later on. And then another way to incorporate music is through chants. This is something super simple that is probably more geared toward classroom or ESL teachers, but anytime there's any kind of story where something repeats, turn it into a chant. Just say it as a cadence and then have students say it with you every time to repeat that part. Another project that I did was we read a poem called On the Day of the Dead by Rene Saldana Jr. This was an idea that I got from an A+ arts training that we went to. So students read a poem in English and Spanish about Day of the Dead traditions, and then they had to create a dance or movement, some kind of little skit to show the events in the poem. So in the poem, there's a family that's honoring a loved one who has died, and students had to go through the motions of what they do in the poem. And then they went around and presented it to the rest of the group. Yeah. Oh, the last thing I want to share is something that I always mention to teachers when I go in and observe, especially in arts classrooms, but really in any classroom. And that's to include environmental print labels around your physical space. So environmental print labels are part of very passive language acquisition. It's not something that we really focus on, but it's something that can be helpful and definitely doesn't hurt. These are some examples of environmental print labels that I have in my classroom. And mine are bilingual because I'm an ESL teacher and most of my students speak Spanish. So when I have students who come who are newcomers who are literate in Spanish but not in English, those words and those bilingual labels help them feel more welcome. It helps them connect to some kind of literacy that they might see around the space. But for an art space or for a regular classroom, they do not have to be bilingual. They could even just be single words. If you Google environmental print labels, tons of free resources will come up. There's a ton on Teachers Pay Teachers. You can find them that have the word and a little picture that goes along with it. But it's very helpful to just label the stuff in your room so that kids know what to call it. A lot of students don't have that prior knowledge, and it's a way that they can connect to a word, to any kind of literacy. In early literacy for K2, especially for ESL students, but really for all students, just that exposure is very important. Thank you so much for listening today. These are just some ways that I incorporate the arts in my ESL lessons. If you need to reach out, my email is available in the slideshow, and I'm also on Twitter at MissIrvin1. So thank you for listening today.
Great, thank you. We really appreciate Anna's advice and tips and some of these examples of what she does in her classroom. So we want you to also be thinking about what benefit would native English speakers get from environmental print in your classrooms. So that's just something to maybe think about, especially at a district level, you know, maybe incorporating with all of your teachers to have consistency across the board and what benefit that could have for both your English learners and your native English speakers. All right. Are there any questions for Anna before we move on? You're welcome to place them either in the chat or unmute. And also, of course, Holly and Yudi, you can ask questions to them as well as we're progressing. So we're going to move on to our last speaker for today. We have Jessica Greene joining us as an art teacher, and we are very excited to have her here live with us to talk to us today. So I'm going to hand it over to Jessica.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Jessica Greene, and I'm an art teacher at Frank Porter Graham Bilingüe Elementary in the Chapel Hill Carrboro City School System. And our school is a dual language Spanish immersion school. And the way that it's structured, 50% of the students are Spanish speakers and 50% are English speakers. And so I've been here almost 10 years, and I've had to really adapt my teaching and learn a lot of strategies for having lots of English language learners in my classroom. So I'm going to share a few of those here with you today. So the three strategies that I want to highlight are language objectives, comprehensible inputs, and developing oral language skills. And these strategies are all things that are easy to just integrate into the lessons that you're already teaching. And they're strategies that actually help all students, not just the English language learners. So the first one that I want to talk about is language objectives, because that's the first one that I learned when I first came to this school, was to always include a language objective with my lesson. And that comes from the SIOP model, which is the Sheltered Instruction Observation Protocol. It's a research-based method that's shown to be highly effective for language learners. And for that, you want to have your content objective and your language objective integrated into your lesson. And this is just an image of my whiteboard, and I have a column for each class, the art goal, and then a column for the language goal. And I keep them very simple in student-friendly language, and I just have one of each for each class period. And I try to incorporate the different language skills: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And you can see some of the words that I use for the language goal, the keywords, things like compare, list, describe. And those are just language skills, so the students know what skill we're working on and what we're trying to learn that day. So in the next slide, I have an example of a first grade lesson that incorporates a language objective. This is a lesson that actually takes 2 or 3 class periods. We look at seascape paintings, and I have the students describe them, and then they draw their own seascape, they paint the seascape, and then finally they write down the steps that they took to make their seascape. And you can see that on the left. I have these little sketchbook worksheets or handouts that they can fill out, and I developed those with my and there's a link for these, so if you want to use them, feel free. I developed them with my literacy coach, and we made them for each grade level, so they're sort of scaffolded to be more complex as they get older. But it's just a great way to integrate some literacy, and it also supports the content because it helps them really understand the art process that they learned. So the next thing I want to touch on is comprehensible input. This is a theory developed by Stephen Krashen, who is an American linguist who specializes in learning second languages. And I have a short clip of this video that I want to share with you. It's a very old video, I'll warn you, but it really demonstrates what comprehensible input means. And I also like it because he does a little bit of drawing in it. So let's take a look.
I'm so sorry, I was on mute still. All right, here we go.
Show you. I'd like to take just a couple of minutes and give you some sample language lessons. I'll use a language that I'm sure you've heard before and maybe some of you speak, and you can tell me which of these 2 very brief lessons you like better. Here's lesson number 1. Wir werden jetzt anfangen, Deutsch zu lernen. Und ich möchte im Voraus sagen, dass nach meiner Meinung Deutsch ist eine sehr schöne Sprache. Und ich hoffe, dass Sie alle sehr viel Erfolg mit Deutsch haben werden. What do you think? Good lesson so far? Do you think if I kept talking to you like that, you'd pick up German? Not very likely. How about if I repeated it? Would that help? Probably not. How about if I said it louder? Would that help? Probably not. How about if I said it and you repeated it back? Again, I don't think that would help. How about if I wrote it out for you and you could see it on your television screen? That wouldn't help either. How about if I wrote it out for you and you copied it down? How about if I wrote it out for you and deleted every 5th word and you tried to guess what the word is? The truth is that none of these things help. None of these things mean anything, and I hope you can see that now. Here's lesson number 2. And for this, you have to watch me carefully. Das ist meine Hand. Verstehen Sie das? Hand? Everyone say, ja, I can hear you, even though it's a TV audience. Good. Kopf. Das ist mein Kopf. Verstehen Sie Kopf? Ja? Gut. Kopf. And here I'll draw a picture now. Kopf. Ist gut, ja? Schön. Kopf. Das ist Mr. Spock, ja? Mr. Spock hat 2 Ohren. Ohren. Verstehen Sie Ohren? Er hat 2 Ohren. Okay, Mr. Spock. Ja? Ach, nein. Entschuldigung. Okay. Augen. Verstehen Sie? Augen, Augen. Wie viele Augen? 1, 2, 3 Augen. 3 Augen. Ist das richtig? 3 Augen? Nein. Wir haben nur 2 Augen. Mund. Verstehen Sie Mund? Und hier ist eine Zigarette, ja? Nein. Zigaretten sind nicht gut. If you understood lesson number 2, not every word, but more or less, I did everything necessary to teach you German. And now I'm going to share with you the most important thing I have learned about language. Probably the best kept secret in the profession. We acquire language in one way and only one way, when we understand messages. We call this comprehensible input. We acquire language when we understand what people tell us, not how they say it, but what they say, or when we understand what we read. Comprehensible.
All right, so I think that is a great demonstration, just to see that you can't rely too heavily on verbal instruction. You've got to have lots of other cues. And as I mentioned before, I think this helps all students, not just English language learners, because it's more engaging. So how can you make your inputs, your language inputs, more comprehensible? I'm going to show you a few examples on the next slide. So, for example, this is another little first grade lesson. It's a painting. I would show an example of the painting of what we're going to be making. I would show an actual physical paintbrush. I would hold up. We're going to use a paintbrush today. I would have a picture on the board of a paintbrush with it labeled. And then once we start actually making the picture, I would have graphic organizers for the students, like the one you see here, where it has very simple steps printed out with pictures to cue them as to what each step is. And this is a first grade lesson, but I do this for my 5th graders as well. And even if the instructions are more complex, I like to highlight the really key words like paint or draw or whatever the task is, so that they don't get overwhelmed with too much text. So just again, gesture, dramatization, visuals, and those things again will help all of your students. So the last strategy that I want to touch on is giving opportunities to your students for developing oral language skills. And you can do that with whole group questions, with small group collaboration, partner talk activities, sharing circles. And I'll tell you 2 specifically that I really like. The first one is one that I start a lot of classes with, and that is a visual thinking strategy where you show an image, and there's a link to an article that kind of explains it more in depth. You show an image and you start with a very simple question: what do you see? And this is really engaging for students because there's no wrong answer, and they can answer something very simple like, I see blue, I see water. Or they can even answer, a lot of my students will just answer in Spanish, and that's okay too, because then they're gaining confidence to speak in class, and they're also engaging with the actual content by looking at the art and thinking about what they see. So that's one that I really like. And then another one that we do at the end of class is we do sharing circles. So students are often eager to show their artwork or talk about what they made. And so we'll make a circle, and I have a little pretend homemade microphone, and they pass it around, and each student can tell about their art. And sometimes I'll give them a prompt to help them if they're not sure what to say, like, I want you to notice, or what I like about my picture is, and then that gives them an opportunity to speak with their peers and share. And in this picture, you can see my students love the microphone. It's just a styrofoam ball on a paper towel tube, but they always have been asking if they could all make their own. So one day we did, and there they are with their own little microphone. So I hope that you can take some of these ideas and adapt them and use them with your own students.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Jessica, for all of these ideas. And again, if you have any feedback, thoughts, or questions, feel free to share those. I was just going to mention the sharing circles I used to do in dance classrooms, both in the K-12 level and the college level. And at the end of the class, get in a circle and give a prompt. Maybe we go around and say one thing that impacted us today. Maybe we go to the middle and share a movement that we enjoyed today, whether it was something that we learned technically or something that we just were feeling and we're moving in that way, but different prompts each day to really kind of do that same sort of thing. So really everything that you're sharing, I think, can be done in any of our arts classrooms. And so thank you so much for sharing these wonderful tips. Sylvia shared, great speaking development activity and sentence prompts are a plus. Great, thank you. Thanks again, Jessica. So we're going to move on to our last section. Making a plan might seem like a daunting task, but we are confident that we have given you some great starting points to get you thinking. So remember our framework that we talked about before, that we're taking best practices from other areas of education and directly relating them to arts education with concrete and specific examples, as we've done in this presentation. So we're applying that arts ed filter to the practice of ELD standards. And we're hoping that you can take this information as district arts leaders or school leaders and share with your colleagues, share with your team members, and really start to create a plan for your school, your arts teachers at your school, or your entire district, and start thinking about how you can build on these topics in your own programs. So how will you transfer what you've learned about ELs into concrete actions for arts educators to be able to take? I'm going to pass things over to Brandon.
Awesome. Thank you. So Sayward is going to drop some links into the chat here in just a second, but we talked to you about this document in the first part, and Sayward and I worked with Ivana and Zatley to come up with a way that we could help arts educators actually figure out what kind of language inputs, what key language uses they are utilizing that connect directly with the arts education standards. So Sayward is dropping in all 4 of the documents for you. They are Google Drive links at this point. So if you can just click on one that interests you, perhaps it's what you taught or what you currently teach, and we'll go ahead and take a look at it. And so after the front material, which really explains pretty much everything that Zatley and Ivana explained in webinar part 1, there are 2 main parts to the documents, and that's the table which identifies how prominent those key language uses are and the mode of communication, whether it's interpretive or expressive. And then also a table of Bloom's verbs taken directly from that grade band standards, which have been crosswalked with those same language uses and modes of communication. So you might notice that the density of verbs doesn't always correlate with the prominence in the first table, and that's just because we only listed each kind of verb 1 time. There might be 6 times that somebody, or that the word use is listed, but we only put it in the table once. So I want you to take a moment just to think. Either you can think to yourself on a piece of scratch paper, put it in the chat, or in your reflection journal, and take a minute just to go through the document and write in the chat how you might actually see using these documents in PLCs to train other teachers, or how teachers might use these documents in their own practice. I'm going to give you just a couple minutes to do that. All right. So we had Holly shared to foster collaboration. Is there anybody else who had an idea? You are welcome to unmute or to drop it into the chat.
Hey, we were thinking that it's also for us, like if we have this in our PLCs, we can get more teachers and more staff involved in what we're doing already, so they can also start thinking of another ways they can do these bilingual, multilingual projects to prepare our English learners.
I love it. Thank you. Okay, awesome. So we sort of had a couple ideas ourselves, and especially with that prominence table, if you're in a PLC with just visual arts teachers or just theater teachers, or even if you're in all of the arts, or if you're in a fifth grade, PLC with all fifth grade teachers and any other specialist who might teach it, or if you're in an arts education secondary pod, unpacking these key language uses just to see where they are, becoming familiar with the four key language uses so that you can identify them in your standards, and then examining whether or not you are actually using those sorts of language skills in practice, or if they're just embedded in the standards, but you're kind of skipping them. And then, of course, re-examining any sort of pacing guides that might be created at the district level to see if they are in alignment to giving students these opportunities to express themselves or interpret language as well. In those Bloom's verbs sections, calibrating the fact that understand is interpretive in form, and calibrating that being able to analyze is expressive arguing, right? Being able to identify all the way across all language units to make sure that everybody is using a common vocabulary. And then looking at the sorts of things that Jessica shared and how would you write language objectives for this standard? And then creating some, a bank of exemplars would be a really great use of time as well. And then on their own, arts education teachers might be able to examine an English language learner's modifications and scores, and then use them with those proficiency level descriptors to be able to write an EL's modification directly into their lesson plan so that they remember, because sometimes all it takes is for us to write it in and then we don't even have to reference it when we're actually instructing, right? And the beautiful thing about these, as we've said over and over, is that they are all strategies that meet the needs of all students, not just our English learners. I saw a great chat fly across here. So Sylvia said, I see its use in both ways, not only bringing literacy into the arts, but also bringing some arts into literacy. Yeah, we love that idea that arts integration is two-way. It's removing the silos away from science is only over here and art is only over here, and recognizing that the clothes on us are a beautiful marriage of that. The shoes on our feet, the cars we drive, the bridges we drive over. Those are both designed aesthetically and engineered. So wonderful. Great. So I think I'm passing it back to Sayward now.
All right, so we're going to move on to our closure for today. So for our optimistic closure, we're going to do the 1-1-1 act. So you're going to think about and share what is one amazing experience you learned today or you had today, or we could say that's your aha moment. What is one challenge, maybe that you still see moving forward or that you've overcome or you've figured out a solution to today? And then one thing that you will try. So you're going to do an aha, a challenge, and a try. And we'd love for you to share those with us. And Brandon has already shared his amazing experience, or aha, is that collaboration is everything. I think that is key. And Brandon and I have definitely learned that over the last two years for sure. And Hollie and Yudi are a great example of that. And even our other teachers, Anna and Jessica, have helped us to see that there's collaboration across the school here. Collaborate with other teachers who may be using these strategies. Jessica says,
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I was lucky enough to be GLAD trained this past summer. That's part of what inspired this series. And for those of you who don't know, GLAD is a method of teaching that extends even beyond the SIOP model. And it's really focused on English language learners. And the fact that I got that so late was a big bummer to me, because I always taught in primarily Hispanic schools. And I was like, how did I not know all of these things? So we really want to encourage everybody to connect with their EL directors and get everyone SIOP trained, get everyone EL trained. Make sure that everybody has this knowledge.
And I'll add, with that collaboration that we've learned by collaborating with Ivana and Zotli, who are our ESL team from DPI, we have learned so much from them, and building off of their passion for this, we just really appreciate the collaboration for this entire series, to be able to get the ball rolling and learn from them. And then we see Jessica has said, I loved seeing a peek of another dual language program or bilingual art program in our state. Mark says, he wants to try the bilingual performance groups, which is a fantastic idea. And can you just imagine that with multiple art forms? So like they're doing with music and about to do with the musical theater production, but in all sorts of performance avenues, I think could be fabulous. Let's see, try labeling in my classroom, a challenge, overcoming some negativity or mindsets within the building or community, and just continuing to show the positivity and outcome of these projects and collaborations. Yeah. Maybe they'll learn to spell xylophone correctly.
That's just everyone, right? Environmental print is good for everyone.
Yes. All right.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here today. We would love for you to please give us feedback on the survey. And that survey is your ticket to your CEU credit certificate as well. I'll put a plug in here for ourselves and say we really truly do take in consideration everybody's feedback. Today we changed the way that we presented Anna's video because of some feedback we got from the last video that we had embedded in a previous session. So We do take it all in consideration, and we try to meet your needs as best as we can as well. So we appreciate your honesty. And you can either click on the slide, or we will put that, there it is, in the chat right now. Please also make sure that you are signed up for our listserv. That is the best way to keep up to date with us at NCDPI Arts Education. It also, this link will take you to every other topic that has a listserv as well. So you can sign up for the EL's listserv as in addition to the Arts Education one. There's even a dual language immersion listserv. All right, and this is all of our contact information from Arts Education at DPI, and you can catch all of our professional development sessions, including today's, at bit.ly/artsedpd catalog. Everything is contained there, and it will link you out to the slide deck, the YouTube recording, and the reflection journal from that catalog. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to meeting or seeing you at our next Building Back Stronger session, which is all about building positive arts ed teacher environments. So thank you so much to our guest speakers today, and we'll see you at the next one.